10 Monsterlanders. All right, I'm recording now.
Oh. 10 Monsterlanders.
All right, so I'm Nate. I'm here with Gretchen and Bobby. We met Bobby because Bobby was the breeder of Gretchen's first Klein Monsterlander, Ebby. And then because Gretchen got Ebby and we were at a Monsterlander test, I ended up getting Aura.
That was my fault too.
It was your fault. It was your fault. You're correct. And then now Gretchen also has Archer, who is one of Ebby's sons, out of her first litter. So it didn't take that much goading, but I wanted to just do like a recap of the New Mexico leg of our hunt, and then I'll try to do another one of these for Kansas, which so far isn't starting out so great. But we'll talk about New Mexico first. So we got to New Mexico 2 days after Christmas, and then we're not going to like say specific locations, but so we were hunting in the southern part of the state to start, and we stayed at a really cool. What would you call that? Was that like a barn that was converted into?
It was a bunkhouse.
It was a bunkhouse. Yeah. Yeah, that was neat.
So we stayed there. Basically, it was like this separate structure from the regular house that the landowners had, and they weren't around. But that place was nice, a good kind of home base for where we were hunting, and then we spent some time hunting Gamble's quail, and I don't think we found any scalies while we were there, and and we found some Mearns quail while we were out there too. Gretch, what'd you think about those first hunts in New Mexico? Any of them that were memorable?
The huge wind day.
Oh yeah, so much wind. What was that? The first full day we were out?
The first full day, yeah.
Yeah, crazy amount of wind. So really tough scenting conditions.
And shooting conditions.
So the dogs got out there and got to stretch their legs and.
Yeah, number 8s don't fly too good through like 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts.
Yeah, that was tough, but we still got out there and we got some scouting done.
We got some birds.
That first day. Gosh, I don't even remember.
A couple.
Yeah. And overall, because we've been to New Mexico
twice now.
Yeah, this was our second time out there.
Mm-hmm.
First time that south.
Yeah.
South as we were. But we've been into Arizona a few times. I think that New Mexico, the weather was overall better in the sense that it was cooler. Like we definitely would get warm out, but our dogs were able to work kind of longer. They're not very heat tolerant.
They just had rain and stuff
There was
too.
Rain. Yeah, there was actually like water in places. Like the Rio Grande actually had water in it. Last year it was completely dry.
Right.
So that was neat. So it's kind of cool to see similar places as we did last year, but see how kind of, different they were because of the water. The Mearns quail is tough. Walking.
A lot of rock.
A lot of wobbly rocks that you have to concentrate on just basically not rolling an ankle so much. So it takes a lot of energy to do that, mental and physical, but all very worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But sometimes
a feeling of accomplishment.
Yes.
When you can. What did we bring back? 5 Mearns that day.
Yeah, and we could have had more.
Oh, of course.
So, well, let's go back. So the first walk we took when we got in, we took Archer out, and we found a little like watering hole kind of spot, right? And so there were 2 spoonbills on the water there
Oh,
that we
God,
jump
I forgot
shot.
about that already.
And so shot one that was dead, and then the second one I shot, and I think my choke was a little open for where I shot it, so it was wounded. So Archer got to do his first kind of little duck search there and get some water retrieves. And then after that, we were walking, and he started tracking really nicely. And I kind of said, wouldn't it be funny if there was a rabbit right there? And not 3 seconds later, a jackrabbit flushed right out of where he was. And so we had to kind of we kept having him track, and he produced that rabbit. It would run, and that happened a number of times. I think I had to shoot it 2 or 3 times, I think. And then by the time we finally caught up to it, I'm trying to get Archer on the actual track again so that he could find the rabbit and get a retrieve. And Gretchen and I watched that thing. It was like in a spaghetti western. The rabbit stood up really tall and just fell straight backwards and expired. And so then Archer got to retrieve the bunny, and that was our first walk there. And then
that was within 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah,
total with the ducks and everything.
And then the next day we that's where we went to that spot that had the big water tank and windmill.
Yeah, north of Hachita. Yeah,
and that dam. Yeah, that place.
Yeah, that place.
And then and then so we found some gambles there. But the wind was so bad that day. I think it was like a sustained 15 or 20 mile an hour wind, and then there were gusts up to 40 or 50 miles an hour. So it made it really hard for the dogs to scent birds and for people to shoot birds. And then that next day we went to, that's when we went to hunt Mearns quail. And so Ebby had the nicest point on a big old covey of Mearns quail that I've ever seen her have. And I, walking in front of her point, got so close to those birds that when they flew, I think I dumped both barrels before those birds were 20 feet away from me. So even I was shooting the most open choke. I had cylinder chokes in both barrels, and I missed twice. And I still, it's going to haunt me forever that she did such good work on that covey, and I missed both of them. I think, was that the group that we hunted up that hillside a little bit, though, right?
And then up and over and down.
Yeah, so did you get any out of that group?
I didn't.
One
I
or
did
two?
not harvest any,
Okay.
but we did get points on them.
Gotcha.
And,
Okay.
in an effort towards harvesting,
So then we found another covey.
because I was usually almost falling on my butt trying to shoot on those going up that hill.
Yeah. And then we found another covey, and I think that one, I don't remember, we got a couple birds. 1 or 2 out of that, I think. And then there was that last covey that I was sending Aura down into a creek. I wanted her to just get wet because I could tell she was really hot. And as she's running down there, she was on the wrong side of the wind, and I don't know, a dozen birds got up, a decent sized covey got up, basically right where I was sending her to go get wet. And so they flush up. Mearns quail tend to flush up kind of a mountain. They go behind trees and they go up the hill. And so then we spent some time trying to hunt singles there, and that's where Gretchen, you got your first Mearns quail there. So Aura pointed one.
Point.
Yeah,
and you went in and flushed it,
in a
I think.
bush. Yeah, and I went in and flushed it. It kind of moved away from us in front of Gretchen. She shot, and then was able to get that one. And then Bobby, you got a couple out of that covey too, 1 or 2, I think.
Yeah, I got 2. And
Yeah. So we got
you got 1.
Yeah, so we got 5 total, and with any kind of covey birds, we're just trying not to shoot the covey out. We're in Kansas now, and it's the first time that I've hunted bobwhites, but my understanding is that they're kind of similar, that they sort of have a home range that's not very big. I think what I've been told about Hungarian partridge, they're similar too. So when you're shooting at these coveys, it's like you're trying to not take too many birds out of a group, because if you are careful about that stuff, then you'll have birds in generally the same area to hunt next year when you come back. Is that correct? Am I right?
Correct.
Saying that?
Yeah.
So we had I felt like a really good day of burn squirrel hunting to be able to walk into a new place and find a couple coveys of Mearns quail, get decent dog work on them, and have never been there before, and just sort of scouting online and stuff like that. I was pretty happy with how we did that day. That's probably my favorite day of the trip so far.
And I had never hunted Mearns, and so it was fun for me to learn. You knew better the habitat and where to try to look for them, and so it was good for me to be able to learn some of that for future.
Then we went to we stayed in a trailer in a town a little bit north of where we were, an Airbnb that was
not a trailer.
It was a double wide.
It was a double
Yeah.
wide. Yeah.
So it was like a luxurious trailer. Our bedroom had a big kind of jacuzzi style tub, but you had to step up into it to get. It was the weirdest thing. I just thought I was going to fall on my face trying to get in and out of that thing. That was also where Aura shit on the bed. So I took her out to go to the bathroom and completely forgot that she hadn't run that day. And Aura's like a once a day shitter. And so I took her out, she peed, and then we brought her inside. And we're like walking around. It smells so bad in here. Why does this place smell like shit? And then I walked in the bedroom. I said, "Oh, it's because she took a dump as big as her head on the bed there." It was disgusting.
It was solid, so that was good.
So Gretchen picked up the pieces and flushed them down the toilet, which is really funny to me for some reason.
In multiple, I think it took me 3 trips. I didn't want to clog the toilet.
So gross.
So that's cool.
So in that place, we hunted around there for a couple days, mostly Gamble's quail, right?
Right.
I think we
saw a lot of quail.
Yeah. We did see a lot of quail.
Yeah.
That was when Anya had her run where she decided that she was a flusher instead of a pointing dog, and I said some very not nice things about her, and then she's pointed very nicely since then. So I'm going to proactively talk about how she's a terrible dog on every trip moving forward. And then maybe I'll get good dog work right off the bat. So we hunted there for a little bit, and then we went to Bobby's house to kind of regroup and
do laundry, and eat
fix a
meal.
wheel.
Yeah, fix a wheel.
Jeez.
So leaving the last place we were hunting before we went to Bobby's house, you should tell them.
I left early, and I was driving up a rather remote highway, and there was a rock wall on the right side, and evidently a significantly large rock rolled across the road, and I hit it, and it dented my wheel, so I got an immediate flat, and I know it's a remote highway because it took me about 45 minutes to change my tire. I had to put a donut on, and in 45 minutes, not a car came by. and I had to drive 50 miles an hour for 190 miles to get home on this donut on the interstate, which was really scary to drive that slow. So anyway, I had to get that fixed. I got a new wheel.
Yeah, so you were able to find something, and those guys squeezed you in pretty fast, and
right.
so we were able to kind of.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have made this trip.
Yeah, we were able to move on to this Kansas trip. So we're on our way back home, but we're hunting Kansas now for this second week of this trip. and we got some general information about where to hunt from friends of ours that we met in North Dakota a couple years ago, and then we got a couple pins from one of those guys, and maybe they were hunted earlier in the year and they were good, but we stopped at a bunch of those places and it was basically bare dirt. I mean,
it had been grazed.
It had been grazed to the ground, and so kind of the stuff that we're looking for is you need to have cover, you need to have food, and there needs to be water reasonably close for you to have a relatively high likelihood to find birds. So we spent the first half of the day trying to kind of look at these different places, and find habitat. And so Bobby ended up kind of splitting off and doing her own thing, and then Gretchen and I did the same thing. We were just trying to look for places that would be good to hunt. So what was supposed to be a hunting day kind of turned into a scouting day more. And then while Gretchen and I were scouting, we did find a number of places with good cover, but then we had our own vehicle mishap. So I drove down this one road across a little wood bridge, and then I saw a lot of mud that I didn't feel good about being able to get through, even though we were in a four-wheel drive truck. So then trying to back up and get out of there, you just started sliding sideways immediately. And so Kansas has this mud. I don't know what it is about this mud. Is that what it is? Yeah. But, our friends that live here kind of warned us about it, and that's why we even delayed the trip by a day or two, because they got bad weather. And when that stuff turns into mud, you just have a really hard time, not hard time. It's basically impassable. So we got stuck, and then trying to back out, we were sliding all over the place. Luckily, Gretchen bought probably 2 years ago a set of those like traction. What are they called? They're
you told me they were dumb.
They're like traction pads or something like that. So these things you stick under the wheels when you're kind of on slippery terrain, and then your tires will bite these plastic traction pads, and then you can usually kind of back out. So we sort of did that, and then we pulled a bunch of brush from the sides of the road and kind of laid that down over top of the mud as well. And then I remembered my dad telling me when I was a lot younger that when you're on slippery terrain, if you take a bunch of air out of your tires, then it just creates more friction. So I think my tires cold, you can fill them up to like 44 psi or something. So I think I dropped that down by about half. And the combination of all those things, we were able to back out and get out of there. We did kind of, when we were most of the way out, have some guys pull up in a much larger truck, much better equipped truck than ours, and offer to pull us out. But we were already pretty much out. So we got out of that, and then we were trying to find a good place to hunt for the 2 or 3 hours we had left of daylight. And so we ended up going to this one little quarter section. Out when you're hunting out west, most of the land you're hunting is broken up into square miles, right? So one section is 1 square mile.
640 acres.
Yeah. And so when you're looking on a program like Onyx or any of these plat maps that you might look at, you'll see like little squares inside of bigger squares. And so hunting those little quarter section pieces, they're nice when you have dogs that don't run super big. None of our dogs I would consider really, really big runners or anything. So those are nice size sections to hunt, and I think a lot of people overlook them because they feel like they're too small. So we found a little quarter section that had 3 streams that kind of converged. And so we took a walk and kind of just walked up and down the banks of all of those. Got really nice searching from my oldest dog Anya and from Gretchen's puppy Archer. Running him with her, it really helped kind of stretch him out a little bit. And she was even running big for her, but it was pretty open cover. So we went around all of that stuff, and then in one of kind of the back corners along the creek, Anya pointed a really nice covey of bob whites, and so when they flushed, I shot. I knocked a couple feathers off of one, but they just kept flying. And then because that place was small, this is the one downside of that. They kind of flew in the direction of private land, and we hunted our way up there. And the dogs got birdie a little bit, but we didn't ultimately find them again. So I think they just flushed onto land we couldn't hunt. And that was kind of the end of our day. The only other thing that happened on that walk was Anya got skunked. I don't know what happened to the skunk. I didn't see it happen, but we were walking back to the truck, and I kept getting whiffs of a skunk, and I couldn't figure out where it was, or maybe somebody just hit it on the road, and when the wind would just catch it right, it was blowing it to us. And then we got back into the truck, and I stuck Anya in the box. We got back to the house that we're staying in here, in this part of Kansas, and she smells terrible. I mean, she stinks, and she made everything that was in the bed of the truck with her stink. So my jacket smells like skunk. My duffel bag with all my clothes in it smells like skunk. I mean, it just stinks. It's so bad. So these are like, I guess, bird dog experiences that everybody's going to have at some point. So Ebby and Anya both had encounters with porcupines. And then this was our first skunk encounter. So it took us 5 or 6 years to get here, but we finally had a dog get skunked, and so that was the end of our day. Bobby, you hunted a couple places,
yeah,
right?
but I have to just add to the skunk thing because a lot of people may not know that I used to always carry Massengale douche because it is really good for cleaning skunk out of a dog.
Really?
Yes. It's in a bottle, and you just douche the dog.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So now you know. Go to
Learn
the store and get
something new.
some. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's a
I spent
pro
the rest
tip.
of the day trying to find some place to hunt. I found at the very end of the day, I found some good habitat, but I've always found out here that when you're looking for birds, particularly in the case of pheasants, it's always, if you're hunting, CRP or whatever, it's really good to have some grain around nearby within a mile, because they gravitate to that. They'll move in and out of the CRP to the grain, back and forth, and that's where birds will be. So even though the habitat looked really good, there wasn't any grain around it. So I think I saw my youngster pup of 8 months pointed a rooster a couple of times, but the wily rooster was alive because he was a runner, fight or flight, and so we didn't get a shot on that. So we saw a few birds, but nothing. The ones that were in range were hens, and the ones that were smart enough to run off and fly at a distance were the roosters, of course.
And so we've been looking at maps tonight to try to pick out places we're going to look at tomorrow. And Gretchen and I drove past a bunch of stuff. But Bobby, what we're looking for when we're doing this, mostly we're looking for these walk-in hunting areas that are adjacent to crop fields, right? So we want to see at least one side of these little squares on these maps that we're looking at that we know we can hunt, that is directly adjacent to, in particular, corn or sorghum is what the advice that I got from other friends
But even
of ours.
wheat stubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten pheasants in Kansas in wheat stubble.
Yeah.
But it has to be pretty high wheat stubble.
Yeah, and we did that one of our hunts in North Dakota. We walked with 2 other guys. I think it was 2 other guys, and we kind of just sort of walked a whole wheat field, but it was the same thing. It was probably knee high. Almost.
Yeah, I haven't seen any high wheat stubble out here yet.
Yeah, and then for quail, we're looking at creeks, right?
Brushy creek bottoms, or brushy fence rows along corn or something like that.
Yeah.
If you can find that, that's probably the best.
So far, Kansas is it's been an experience, but hopefully the hunting will get better tomorrow.
We've been hunting, we just haven't been finding.
Yeah, that's true. That's why it's called hunting.
The people
That's
have been
true.
very nice around here.
Yeah, the people are great. That's for sure the case.
Cute little towns.
Yeah. Oh, I completely skipped over the little motel place we stayed last night. Yeah, I mean, you're not really a wild bird hunter until you stay in a motel that costs you $30-some a night.
And it was actually
It was pretty
very
nice.
nice.
It wasn't, yeah. It
Except for the
it was
broken
not-
crack
it
pipe
wasn't
stuff.
bad.
But you
It
know,
was called
it's
the.
neither here nor there.
It was. Yeah, shout
was in
out to
Great Bend.
the Travelers Budget Inn in Great Bend, Kansas. It was very cheap, but it was clean. The room was clean. I won't say the surrounding area was clean, but the rooms were. We paid more for not as good of a place to stay, for sure.
And we always like, when we have our dogs in the car, we like to be able to pull up right to the door of our room instead of having interior doors.
Yeah, I've heard people call them down and outs.
There we go.
Yeah.
I call them mom and pops.
Yeah, the exterior door, you can walk straight out to your truck so you can check on your dogs, feed them, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's been a recap of our trip so far. It's been a good time. The hard part about hunting public land is that you're hunting public land and you're hunting wild birds, and so it takes time and effort. A buddy called me yesterday while we were driving, and he, when I told him how much we were walking, he was like, "It sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot of walking." It's just out here, there's so much stuff to hunt, so trying to pick where to go is hard. The only thing I can say is that since we've been doing this for a couple years, is you start finding places with birds, and then you can go back to those places most of the time the next year and find birds again. And so if you've had a couple walks where you're not finding anything, you go back to a place that's produced for you, you shoot a bird or two, you feel better about yourself, and then you go back out and you keep hunting new places. But I think it's fun trying to pick apart the landscape and find spots that hold birds. Our dogs have to do a lot of the work, but that part is the part that we're kind of responsible for, is putting them in the right places so that they can find birds in the covers that you're choosing to hunt. And so the longer that I do this, the more I'm enjoying that part. Like, can I look at a map? Can I look at the topography? When we pull up there, do I see cover that looks okay? And then if so, then we put the dogs down there and they hunt. And then if we find birds, I'm happy. If I shoot birds, I'm ecstatic. And that's kind of how this stuff has been working for us. But I really, really enjoy these trips. This is like our third or fourth year taking a bunch of them. And it's just been a lot of fun. So hopefully somebody listens to this and then they'll take their first trip, because we didn't do this stuff 5 years ago. We weren't really traveling to hunt with our dogs like we are now, and it's been really, really enjoyable. We've met a lot of really great people, and we've seen a lot of parts of the country that I think I definitely wouldn't have any reason to be here if I wasn't trying to walk around with my dogs.
I always tell people that I used to breed Munsterlanders. I'm not breeding anymore, but when people would call me and talk about getting a puppy, I would always just tell them, I said, you're not buying a puppy, you're buying a lifestyle. Yeah, and that's true. That's what Nate's saying.
Yep. Changed our lives.
Closing thoughts.
Cheers.
Cheers. Here.
To better luck tomorrow.
Till tomorrow.